The purpose of this video is to demonstrate how to take a sheet of veneer, purchased or handmade, slice off a piece of stringing, and then to take that piece of stringing to the proper dimension so it fits into an inlay groove. Materials that are often used for stringing. This is a dyed black anagray, nice tight grain, very good material. Here is a piece of pale English sycamore, which is what a lot of folks have changed over to using instead of holly, because it's fairly available and it's a lot less cost. It doesn't behave as well, but it is probably the most common substitute today. And then there's good old-fashioned holly. Nothing like it, but it's getting harder to get and more expensive. Now, when it comes to purchasing the veneer, I like to get 0.9 millimeter veneer, which works out to about 34/1000ths of an inch or a heavy 32nd. Since most of the grooves being cut for inlay are at a 32nd, it's a good thickness to work with. Now, regardless of whether you're using holly, sycamore, anagray, walnut that you've taken down, cherry, whatever you want to put into whatever wood is completely up to you. But regarding the materials, you want nice straight grained stock. No pin knots, no knots. The real wavy stuff might look good in terms of figure, but for making stringing, every one of those undulations is a place where your stringing can snap. So, need to be aware of that. I'm not sure how much of this you're going to see, but I do want to try to illustrate a point. On this piece, I'm trying to put the grain in here. We have grain going over like this. It's coming down over and back. When we get to here, we get a pretty straight run going where the grain is just running across. So I'm going to go ahead and recut that along that line. Just so I've got a pretty straight edge to work with, and hopefully that will reduce my likelihood of breakage. Now you see I have this wooden ledge here on my rule. That's in case the blade slips up over the top of the rule and wants to cut whatever's in its way, particularly my finger. Lessons hard learned. Okay. So there's a piece of stringing, or a piece of material that should work pretty well for stringing. I'm using this fixture to slice it on. It is simply a piece of 3/4 inch MDF. This one's about 26 inches long with a 1/2 by 1 1/4 piece of maple screwed onto it with 5 screws. Okay, I don't nail it, I screw it. And the reason being, it serves as a chip breaker. And maybe you can see the score line that exists there. But eventually this area will get chewed up. So what I'll do is pop my 5 screws, take my piece off, go to the table saw or whatever, cut off 1/8 of an inch, and then just put it back on. I use MDF because MDF doesn't seem to have grain to it. So the cutter doesn't get caught into the grain. And by the way, that maple strip should rest 1/32 of an inch, about the thickness of the veneer, above the surface. This is the slicing gauge I'm going to use to slice the strip off. Although I will say this makes a tremendous marking gauge as well. My friend Chris Bexford uses it exclusively for that. As you can see, it has this steel rod. This rod is important. It's mounted with this little Allen key down here, so I want to loosen that off a bit and set it up so the steel bar is overlapping the fence. Basically, it will help hold down the veneer as it's being sliced. So you want that bar extending out a little bit. The blade has got a minute double bevel on it, cuts a very fine line, and should cut pretty quickly. Now when I'm doing this, the process is really simple. Start at the bottom, start slicing. Work your way from the bottom to the top. A little finger there to help hold it down. Give it a pull. And there's a piece of stringing. There is a piece of stringing. At the bottom, work your way to the top. Careful. And then slice it off. So there's a couple of pieces of stringing. I usually slice the stringing at about 0.068, a heavy 1/16 of an inch. That's a good width. Making it wider is easier to slice, but every subsequent step is much more difficult. So stick with the heavy 1/16. I want to show it at a different angle. And if you do have veneer, by the way, that's being squirrely, you can just drop down a ruler on top. This one has sandpaper on the back to prevent slippage and to help hold it flat. And there's the process of slicing it off. Boom. Now this is the thicknessing gauge. It has 2 slots. The theory behind that was if you were resawing your own veneer, you probably couldn't get it as thick or as thin as you'd like, so this helps rough it in. And then the second one takes it to final thickness. The wide one, though, I have to say I've used it quite a bit for taking a banding that's just a hair too thick and slicing off a little of its edge. So that's a good function for this one as well. Now I'm going to take my piece of stringing, position it, and pull it through. If you're not getting shavings, your tool needs to be resharpened. There's those shavings coming off. Let's do a piece all the way. I'm going to pinch it between my fingers, and I'm going to pull up at an angle. It has a tendency to want to dive to the bottom, so I'm trying to avoid that by holding it. And every so often I want to flip it over to take off what I started out holding it with and get a little more so it's even. Taking a ruler with sandpaper on it or a sanding block and pulling the string over it helps eliminate any little things that might catch when you try to put it in. Now in terms of size, I'm going to rest it in, use my finger to guide it in, and it just goes right in there. What for me is a good fit is I don't see any gaps, but I can still slide it. That's ideal. So that, in essence, is how you make a single piece of stringing. If you found this helpful, I encourage you to watch a whole assortment of videos I'm producing, short ones, on how to do these various operations. Thank you.